Welcome to Testing in the Pub.
Welcome to Testing in the Pub.
We're back.
This
We're
is
back.
the first one of the new year.
It is.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Dan. Happy New Year to anybody who's listening. All three of you. Happy New Year.
Slightly late. When's the cut-off point for saying Happy New Year? It's usually like 2 or 3 weeks in. Right?
You're Scottish. Presumably it's Burns night, and it's not Burns night yet. That's what, Sunday.
That's a good
so,
one. Yeah. Cool. Right. So today's topic, pairing.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure will lead into many interesting paths of conversation. But let's start with the topic of pairing first anyway. Right, Steve, why would someone pair? What's the purpose of pairing?
I think that there's a lot of different reasons you might do it. Learning is one. It's a great way of learning if you pair up with somebody. And it's a great way of working essentially more efficiently and making sure that a team is glued together and that your position as a tester in the team is not one of isolation, but one that's a really integral part of the whole development process.
Yeah, I completely agree. But I think that depends on who you're pairing with as well.
It does.
And obviously team dynamics come into that as well. So when I think about pairing, well, yeah, I pair in my team, but there's different team members that I would pair with. So like a tester and a developer, for example. That I completely see what you're saying, because there is possibly difficulties within the team depending on the organisation setup and how testing is seen within the organisation. So pairing with a developer can give lots of benefits. So there's lots of reasons you can do that, whether that's to change mindsets and dispel misconceptions, or to learn about the product, or to even just design to talk about the product. But when it comes to tester and tester, that's kind of different reasons, right? It's going to be different reasons. You should have.
Well, yeah, I think it's there's a couple of things there. So the first one, who you pair with. Some people, irrespective of what role they do, are easy to pair with and kind of get it, and some don't. So you need to be careful. You need to plan pairing. Don't just kind of trot up to any random person and say, "Hi, I want to pair with you," because that may not work. But yeah, if you want to pair you pair because both of you get something out of it. Even if it's something as simple as another pair of eyes on something, or somebody with the ability to focus on, say, preparation of test data, for example, while the other person pairing is maybe doing some of the testing. Or maybe somebody's actually kind of driving and somebody's taking notes, for example, in a test pairing situation.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, because when I see developers pair, like, they'll pass the keyboard and then one of them code while one of them's designing, and they'll pass the keyboard back and that one will code. But whereas with testers that don't have that programming skill, they don't have coding skills, you wouldn't be able to work in that sort of dynamic.
I've seen it happen.
Yeah?
I've seen it work, but more like developer codes something, immediately passes it to tester who's sat next to them. Tester tests it. While the tester's testing it, developers may be either doing some tidy up work, or maybe they're working on an automated test to test it, or maybe they've moved on to something else.
That's interesting. For me, whenever I've done that, it's not been a case of I've been passed the keyboard to test it. It's the conversations that it stems from, right? So if he or she, the developer, is coding, right, I'm asking about what it is that they're coding, why they're coding it that way.
So it's that learning.
All the other different variables. How else might they do this that might enhance performance or be more secure or stuff like that?
Or even be more testable.
Yeah, exactly, more testable. Yeah. Thinking about different scenarios. If they are coding a situation where it's error handling for an input field, then I'll start talking about the different other types of errors that are possible with this input field, and it will stem a discussion where it becomes more design, right? Because we're designing it as we're doing it. It's kind of like
Mm.
exploratory development.
Yeah, in a way, it's essentially making a smaller iteration,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah,
I think that's
exactly.
what's absolutely key. The other thing to maybe touch upon in a little bit more detail is how pairing can help your influence within a team as the tester. So if you
Yeah.
maybe find it more difficult to approach developers, or you find that you're typically left out of conversations or important meetings, then getting the team around to a pairing way of working can really help integrate you,
Yeah.
and that's only going to be a good thing.
Well, but the way that I tackle it is paired sessions should be planned anyway. You shouldn't really spring it on someone. Do you want to pair right now? This very minute.
Yeah.
It should be.
Hi, are you busy? Can I pair with you? No, go
exactly.
away.
As part of your stand-up, the way that I tackle it is, if I see someone picking up a story that I want to learn more about, start building my mind maps or whatnot. Then I would talk about that in stand-up, and I'd be like, right, you're picking this story up today. Is it okay if I pair with you when you pick this story up? And usually it'll be yes. If there's a no, then I'll say, well, look, is there anything that I can do to help get the blocker out of the way so that we can pair? But ultimately, when I get pairing with them, then I start asking questions and learning and building my mind map and asking more questions about the design. Design is key for how we're going to develop something, and asking the questions, the 5 W's and an H, and then asking they're the core questions. Then asking the sub questions like does, do, can, you know.
Yeah.
If, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know what they're called. I call them sub questions.
Yeah.
Because it stems more responses. You know.
They're the next logical step, aren't they?
Yeah, and then usually they can see what I'm doing and they take interest in what I'm doing, and we have a conversation around about the design, and they see the benefits of the questions I'm asking. And then that's when, if it is a difficult person, I'll start talking about what testing actually is, right? Because chances are they're a difficult person because they don't understand.
So you can kind of
Yeah.
pitch in and influence in that way.
Yeah, so that's
a good idea.
that's when you start influencing and dispelling misconceptions, and I find that when I'm pairing, because we're so vocal and we're collaborating, they're so much more open to listening about to listening to what you're trying to say when you're trying to dispel the misconceptions. And it makes a difference because then they take that into the meetings that you're not invited to, like you said, saying, oh well, actually Dan or Steve might be really handy in this meeting because they ask these type of questions, so let's get them in.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it kind of comes to that.
Yeah.
In fact, Richard Bradshaw said to me yesterday, it's like the tester should always be the first person in the meeting, and I think there's a lot to that. There's very few meetings that I've ever been to where I've thought this wouldn't benefit from having somebody with a tester's mindset and a tester's skill set in.
I think that depends on the meeting, though. I'm going to be like devil's advocate here, right? I'm going to say that if it's a meeting where decisions are required, then the PO should be the first person in the meeting. A decision maker, sorry, maybe not necessarily the PO. Someone who is able to make a decision should be in that meeting, right? Depends on the purpose of the meeting, right? If it is a design thing,
I guess you're looking at the quorum, aren't you? You're looking at the key people who should be in the room, and of course, if a decision's to be made, you need a decision maker. Maybe as testers, we're not great at decision making.
Yeah, and I suppose the developer is very important in the meeting because of the fact of how you planning to develop this. You know, the more different types of people within that role, then the more diverse the opinions will be.
Yep.
So I don't know. I was in a Three Amigos conversation, and we were talking about how something can be developed, pagination.
Right.
And one developer said, well, I'm thinking about developing it this way. And another developer was like, really? Because I was thinking something completely different. And it sparked this big conversation. And then I was pitching in with, well, this way is more testable. But seems as if it might be more of a risk coming towards performance, things like that. So
would you always have 2 devs and a tester in your 3 amigos? That's not the traditional
No.
kind of 3 amigos.
No,
is
3
it?
amigos is PO, dev, and test.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily 3 people. It's 3 roles, right? At least. But I would try and have multiple people within those 3 roles.
Yeah.
Right. PO is quite difficult, but you might have a BA, for example.
Yeah,
you
or
might have
a designer.
UX guy.
Yeah. I find they work very effectively
Yeah,
when you
exactly.
put someone from design, a tester, and a dev.
Yeah. I think
that
that's a
conversation.
misconception that people have about 3 amigos, that it's just 3 people, but it's actually the 3 roles.
Yeah.
So, yeah, good point.
Does that mean if you've got all 3 roles, you could have a 3 amigos conversation rather bizarrely with yourself?
Interesting. It's really a one-man team, right?
But I suppose
Startups.
it opens up another really interesting point, which is who do you pair with? Who can you pair with? Don't necessarily just think that you can pair with a developer or pair with a tester. I've seen testers pairing up with designers, for example, and
That's a
offering
really,
really
good
important immediate feedback on designs and on essentially on usability of designs. I think that can work very, very effectively.
That's a great point, yeah. A lot designers are involved in 3 amigos conversations. I've never actually paired with one, but I can see times and experiences where that would have been really useful. Is it a problem though that designers, well, based on my previous experiences in companies I've worked in, designers sit outside of the agile team?
Oh, okay. I think it depends on the team.
Yeah,
And the team I'm working with at the moment, the designers are part of the team. So it does depend very much on the nature of what you're developing.
Yeah.
But yeah, having those designers as part of a team, I found has worked incredibly effectively.
What about POs? Would you pair with a PO?
You could pair with a PO when they were. I could definitely see value when you. Well, in fact, I've seen this happen. Sitting down and writing things like acceptance criteria, for example. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe more of a BA role in some organisations, a PO role in others.
Yeah.
But I definitely see value there. There's nothing to stop that happening. It's probably going to happen less often. That's probably just more due to the availability of POs rather than anything else.
Yeah. And here's a question, well, for you. As a manager, do you pair with team members?
Hi, I'm a manager. Do I pair with team members?
With the management hat on?
I've never done that. That's a good question.
It would be interesting.
It
I think
would-
it
it
would. I know that, I don't know how your team works, but I know that some teams, managers tend to not see the true dynamics within the team and things like that, because they sit at that level above and the team don't necessarily communicate with the manager the same way they would with the team members.
Yeah, and that's always going to happen.
But-
No manager is ever going to be.
Yeah, totally. But
As integrated as a team
the
member.
benefit of having. I can see the benefit of pairing with my manager, for example, right? Because it would get him more involved. It would allow him to see exactly what's going on within the team and pitch him with his experiences as well. You know.
So would he pair with you on a testing task or some other sort of task?
Oh, good question. Possibly more of a design task, I'd imagine.
Okay.
Unless I wanted him to learn more about how I test and like exploratory test, session-based test management, things like that, or BDD. If I felt there was a process problem, like we weren't doing BDD properly or whatnot,
Yeah.
then maybe I'd get him to pair to experience those problems.
That would be kind of. I can imagine that initial conversation and that initial pairing session could be quite awkward for some people, because it could almost see like a manager is being brought in to kind of. I think there might be a problem here. I'm essentially under the guise of pairing going to spy on you and find out whether you're doing things right or not. People
Well,
might perceive it like that.
This is where skills come into play with pairing. Right? You need to have good communication skills,
Yeah.
particularly as a tester, right? Because that's one of the key skills that you bring. Right?
Yeah.
So I guess you need to feel comfortable talking to your manager in a way that would be like a team member.
Yeah. Well, I suppose that's equally applicable to a developer, for example.
And a developer as well,
Yeah, you need to feel comfortable talking to a developer. Also, those communication skills, you need to be comfortable talking in a shared language. So
Yep.
you probably need to learn how to talk a little more technically than you may be used to, for example. I think that's quite a common issue between test and dev, is that testers may not be able to speak, not maybe detailed technical language, but at least understand at a kind of high level the architecture of what they're testing and how to describe it in ways which a developer would understand.
I think that's one of the key reasons why developers might have a problem with pairing with a tester, because they feel as if the tester won't understand what they're coding, right?
Yeah.
Being able to read code, right?
Yeah.
But I think for me, it's like as soon as you start having the conversations, right? Now, I'm not a coder. I don't know every language or whatnot. I know how to write very basic automated scripts using Otter and Ruby, right? But if I'm looking at JavaScript, I've not got a clue, right? But I still can see like if statements or scenarios, and I can still ask questions around about those scenarios, and I can get the developer to talk to me about what it is, the feature wise, and visualize it, right?
Yeah.
And ask questions about it and be involved at that level, And then also, as I'm pairing, I'm learning about reading code, I'm learning about things like that. So that's how I've managed to pick up what I've got so far,
Yeah, and kind of if you flip that on its head, one traditional other useful advantage of pairing is that developers are quite frequently accused of being kind of too blinkered and too kind of deep down in the code and not considering the bigger picture.
Yep.
And
so they're learning at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Everybody should pair.
So what other skills do we need?
Influencing is a key skill. So that ability to influence, I guess we talked about that a little bit already. It's important you try, when you start pairing, try and find a common ground. Try and find something that you can that you both understand, that you can build a kind of pairing relationship around. Now,
definitely.
if you do automated testing, then that's probably going to be easy for you, because you are essentially coding something, and you can kind of maybe build that common ground there. And then an advantage you can get out of your pairing relationship is you'll probably end up with more testable code. You'll probably find there are more IDs in there that make it more easy for your automation code to access pages, for example, or applications.
I think even at a personal level, having a common ground at a personal level. So when I'm first pairing, like we'll talk about the weekend, we'll talk about what we did last night, right?
Maybe you'll make them tea, who knows?
Tea is a great influence too. I think I've mentioned that in every podcast so far. But anyway, so talk about outside of work experiences, and start building up a relationship and a really good rapport with the person. And then that way it makes it a lot easier, because it kind of builds a friendship, and it gets round, as soon as you can see someone as a friend, it gets round a lot of barriers when you work with that person, right? So I think that makes a difference as well. So.
What about challenges? What challenges do you think one would face when starting pairing, over and above the needing to get over that initial kind of acceptance hurdle?
Yeah, but the biggest challenge is getting buy-in from the person you want to pair with. If they don't understand pairing and they don't understand what you do, right? Some of the most difficult challenges in my testing career has been working with difficult people that I've had to learn from. So I've wanted to pair with, but they just didn't understand the need for a tester, for example, and they just weren't open to pairing at all. So that was one of the biggest challenges. Another one would be if you don't have the skills like communication, or if you're, I don't know, I want to say not a people person, but do you get people like that?
I kind of know what you mean. Some people do prefer to work on their own. That I would argue is a bigger issue for a team than just affecting pairing relationships.
Yeah.
But it's something you need to be aware of,
Yeah.
for sure. How about forget the kind of team, but how about kind of maybe above the team? I mean, I've seen pairing initiatives fail because there hasn't been managerial buy-in, for example. They see it as
that's a great
inefficient
point.
because it's
Yeah.
why do you need suddenly there are two people working on this instead of one. If only that guy was working on it and you were working on something else, we get twice as much done, wouldn't we?
If you don't estimate your stories based on two people working on it, then you're not going to have the what's the word I'm looking for? You're not going to have the. What was I even saying? I was going to say.
You were saying something about stories.
Yeah. If
and
you.
pairing.
Yeah, with estimations. So, if you're estimating your stories based on one person working on that story, right? It's the manpower within the team, right? You're not going to have the mandate to pair without including that as part of your throughput for your sprint or whatnot. You know.
I think also it's a matter of looking at selling the efficiency gain based in terms of the number of defects or issues that you may prevent by a pairing approach. And so it's probably a good idea to go off and get some kind of supporting stats of some sort beforehand that can help you there.
Yeah.
It won't be easy because it's not obvious in that sense, but
yeah.
And you have to be very careful you don't give some or you use some statistics which are ultimately a little bit meaningless.
Talking about the curve, aren't you? The curve of truth.
Oh yes, the curve of truth. Explain the curve of truth for the benefit of the listener. So,
it's just when you put that curve diagram, when you put time in the bottom, you put whatever you want up the left hand side, be it throughput, effort,
and you draw
money,
an exponential curve on there.
Exponential curve, and then you just talk.
Yeah.
Whatever you want, as long as it sounds good, management will.
Yep.
Well, I want to say management, but I can't say
Dan.
that.
That's a future podcast episode. I think we should do because
The curve of truth.
I'm kind of on a slightly unrelated note. I'm slightly fed up of reading testers on Twitter moaning about management. Who is this management?
Yeah, that's true. We mean the CEOs.
Yeah, we're board level
people
people,
that-
board
yeah,
level people,
board level
where,
people, yeah.
where you and I will never fear to tread, or indeed tread.
The people that ask to quantify everything,
Yeah.
as in, you want to make these changes, quantify it to make it more understandable in money terms.
Yeah.
So,
How do you measure the value of testing? That's another podcast, I think.
the curve of truth, or maybe the curve of destiny, would be a better name for it. The curve of destiny. That's
The
brilliant.
curve of destiny. So back onto pairing then. Dan.
Right, so more challenges. Actually, there's more challenges when you're actually pairing as well. So
yeah.
if someone's a keyboard hogger, that's a pet hate.
Yep.
Where you're trying to type, but they're trying to type over you, so they're stretching over across you to essentially take over. That's not teamwork, I don't think.
Yep.
So patience is another skill. Right?
Yep.
Also, mobile phones.
I guess
They can get big
general etiquette is it's kind of the same as meeting etiquette, isn't it? If you've spent the time pairing, or you spent the time arranging the pairing, you don't want to waste that by distractions. You want to cut yourself off. It's almost like it's like a session-based approach essentially.
It should be, and that's what I was going to say. You should time box your pairing and take breaks as well. You know, it's kind of, you shouldn't pair for 4 hours non-stop. Right? You might work on your own like that, but when you're pairing, because it is quite intense, because it's constant communication and your brain's constantly switched on, right? It can be tiresome. So I tend to like to structure my pairing sessions like I do schedule-based test management.
So a very clear goal and
Time
a very
box.
clear time box.
Yeah,
It's a good
definitely.
tip.
That's a challenge as well, like staying switched on. So
Bring food.
yeah, and tea, to be honest. Cool. So I think that sums up pairing quite well.
Yeah, I think it does. I think so. Yeah, give it a go. I think that's the main thing. Is
Yeah.
don't be afraid to ask. don't be afraid at stand-up, as I think we mentioned earlier. If a ticket comes up and it looks interesting, don't be afraid to ask whether you can pair with someone. You may well be pleasantly surprised. They will probably be surprised, but hopefully in a good way.
Yeah, and it's good if you're in a culture, an organisation culture that currently allows you to pair. You know, that's a really good situation to be in. And if you're not familiar with it, there's plenty to read online. Don't know if there's any books on it, but it's quite a small subject. But
I
there's
don't know.
plenty of blogs to read online.
Yeah.
Like Google search or
One
forums.
that immediately pops into my mind is one that Toby the Tester's done with pairing with developers. That's definitely
He's got a
well
really
worth
good
reading.
talk about that as well.
I've not seen that yet.
Right, cool. So,
Excellent. Well, that's I think enough for this testing in the pub episode. So hopefully we'll be back very soon.